Welcome to my review for The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. You'll find all my other Hammer reviews in my Hammer playlist. So this was Hammer's second attempt at making a mummy film. It's not really a sequel, it's more of a do-over. The plot sees your typical group of archaeologists and adventurers pilfering and stealing stuff from temples in and around Cairo, and they find a mummy which they try and take out of the country back to London, not to put in a museum, which would be bad enough, but the American backer of the expedition, he wants to take the mummy on some kind of road show. And as you can imagine, everybody back in Egypt is not too thrilled about that. So one particular person uses some black magic to make the mummy come alive again and go after anybody who was intimately involved in the dig. So quite a similar plot to the first film, albeit there's a bit of a twist this time with the third act, which I'll come to. Now, I really liked that first Mummy film. I thought it was a very slick, professional production, which I feel Hammer put a lot of care and attention into to try and make it as good as their other first-time monster efforts like Dracula and The Curse of Frankenstein. I don't think they quite succeeded, but they came damn close. I really liked that 59 Mummy film. This second effort is sadly a lot more messy. The director is a guy called Michael Carreras, who was a long-time associate of Hammer in a producer role as well as in a directing capacity. Actor-wise, we don't have Lee or Cushing back this time, which is obviously a blow. The actors who come in their place, for most of them, this was their only Hammer film that they ever did. A lot of the time that I look up the filmographies of lead actors who have been in Hammer films, I usually expect to see one or more credits that they've done from other Hammer films or maybe Amicus films, but that's not the case this time. So I wonder if they took a different approach possibly to the production and the casting. There is one returning actor called George Pastel. In the first film, he played a completely different character, I think. His name in that film was Mehmet Bey. He was basically the secondary villain who made the mummy come to life. I couldn't stand that man. I just wanted to strangle him. I think the mummy might have actually done my work for me in that regard. I don't recall. This time around, he's playing a guy called Hashmi Bey, possibly his brother, seeing as he's got the same surname. I think it's meant to be a completely different character. But essentially, he's doing the same role. He's playing the voice of Egypt, you know, the guy who gets to tell the naive British, you should really think about putting that mummy back where you found it if it's not too late already. The key difference this time is that Bey is not the one bringing the mummy back to life. He only voices his displeasure verbally. That's as far as he takes it. And for that reason, I much preferred this version of the character to the one Pastel was playing in the original film. I think this is actually the only way that The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb improves over the 1959 Mummy. My second positive, and my final one actually, is another character, Alexander King, played by Fred Clark. He's the brash, arrogant American financier of the dig. He's got no time for superstition or mumbo jumbo, but I still like him anyway. He's very charismatic, and we can't just think of him as an arsehole because he doesn't believe in the curse of the mummy's tomb. You know, a lot of people probably wouldn't in his shoes. He just wants to make his money, you know. And I think what really sold me on this guy was the demonstration of his roadshow that he puts on a bit later in the film. He's not just some suit sat in the corner paying other people to do the hard work for him. He's actually written this show himself. He's clearly quite competent at his craft. This show that he puts on is very informative and well done. It's got some touching moments, and I really like that scene. It does have a predictable ending with him opening up the coffin to show everybody the mummy and it's empty, though judging by the expressions on everybody's faces in the audience, I thought there'd be a dead body in there. Even King's death scene is the best in the film, not that it's a particularly high bar that's set by everybody else. So King is walking along in the smoky streets of downtown London, and the mummy sort of appears at the top of these stone steps. It's a really well staged scene, and comically, King still doesn't believe in the mummy. Even when he sees it with his own eyes, he thinks it's somebody else dressed up in bandages. I'm guessing the moment where the mummy puts his arms around King's neck is the moment where he possibly comes around to Bay's way of thinking, but it's too late by that point. So to get into my negatives, let's start with the opening of the film, which, like the 59 original, begins in Egypt, at least for the first 10 or 15 minutes, but it's not as good as the opening from the previous film. It's actually a little bit confusing. We start with the death of this middle-aged archaeologist. He gets stabbed by some horseback riders, and it's quite a brutal scene, actually. It feels a little bit out of sync with the rest of the film. Then we meet the daughter of the deceased. Her name is Annette Dubois, something like that. She's meant to be like the main hot toddy of the movie, but I think she's quite unlikable. I mean, she doesn't grieve over her dad for more than about 2 minutes, and then for the rest of the film, it's like she's totally forgotten that her dad was on this expedition and he died. She's engaged to another guy who was on the expedition, and they seem to have a very touchy-feely, loving relationship. But halfway through the film, she meets this other guy who is quite charming to her and reads her a few lines of poetry, and then suddenly that's it. She wants to leave her fiance for this guy, even though her fiance is a perfectly nice bloke. It's all a little bit flaky, in all honesty. And when we get to the final few scenes, the tension in those scenes is meant to be the fact that Annette might die. She's the character in peril. And yet I'm just thinking to myself, I'm not really that bothered about this girl. She's an average actress playing a mostly unlikable woman. There are other problems with the finale. So the big twist in this is that it's not actually an Egyptian who resurrects the mummy. It's one of the supposed good guys hiding in plain sight. It's Adam, a kind of aristocrat. He's the guy who turns Annette's head halfway through the film. It transpires that he's actually 3,000 years old and he's the mummy's brother. He somehow got himself entangled in the original curse, and he has been told that he cannot die, basically, unless it's by the hands of his brother, I think. But this just leads to a really silly finale where the film likes to make out that it's a really dramatic moment when the mummy is drowning Adam, but I just kind of thought to myself, isn't this what Adam wants? He was just saying a couple of minutes ago that he wants to die. I don't think it's ideal that villains die in a film, but that's what they want. We should want them to hate dying, you know? It should be a satisfying process for us, and in this instance, it isn't. I don't know where the John Bray character is during the finale, by the way. John Bray is the fiance of Annette, and for at least the first half of the film, I thought this guy was meant to be the main character, but he just sort of disappears with about 15 minutes left. This whole thing is so disjointed in terms of its characters. We just don't get anybody who is the official lead. We kind of bounce from one person to the next. It's a bit all over the place. I thought during the steamboat sequence, when Adam first turns up, that he was just going to join Annette and John, and they would form a kind of three-way team, a bit like what Brendan Fraser has in the more modern day mummy films, but that doesn't turn out to be the case at all. The actual mummy in this is quite well designed, and during his first two appearances, when he takes a couple of people out, he's really good. He's quite creepy, but the longer the film goes on, the script even manages to ruin the mummy. He becomes a bit of a weakling late on. He stops feeling like, you know, a killer monster. He just does a few really odd things. He slaps Adam at one point, which just feels totally wrong. And then at the end, he's carrying Annette around and just not feeling very threatening anymore. Now, before I forget to mention it, I'm going to talk about a certain scene which happens about half an hour from the end. It takes place in Adam's house, and Annette ends up unconscious on some stairs, and then Adam and the mummy are having a bit of a set-to at the bottom of the stairs. There's one camera shot then which shows us Annette unconscious, but there's another dead body next to her, or another unconscious body that suddenly appeared right next to her. but there weren't two people who were made to be unconscious on the stairs when this drama was happening. So I'm kind of wondering to myself, was this a movie mistake where originally they were meant to have two people up there, but then they changed it at some point and made it one person, but a clip from the original footage has been left in by accident? Or is it just a trick of the camera? Maybe I'm going a bit crazy, because Annette has some kind of shawl or cape during this scene, and if that's flopped over in a certain way, it could give off the illusion that there's two bodies on the stairs. But I have winded back the tape both times I've watched this film to try and get to the bottom of what I'm seeing, and it's just inconclusive. I swear though, it looks like there's suddenly two bodies on the stairs in this one shot. If you have this movie yourself on DVD or Blu-ray, do me a favor, put it on, go to that scene and give me your opinion of it. I hope it turns out to be a movie mistake and there is actually two people in the scene, because it would just add a little bit of fun to the film in a kind of it's garbage day type way. And I think this film desperately needs something like that. Before I go, I'll quickly show you the version of the film that I have for this. Here it is on DVD. Now, when I first went hunting for this, it was quite hard to find, at least in my region. I don't know about the world over, but the only copy I could find online was £33 second hand. In American dollars, that's probably like 45 or something like that. Very expensive for a bare bones DVD that's second hand. What I didn't know at the time is that they were getting ready to release a Blu-ray for the film about halfway through 2020. If only I'd known, I would have just waited for that, because the Blu-ray has remastered the film. It's got loads of features on it and stuff. So I was just unlucky on this one. I've seen this film twice now, once when I first got the DVD a couple of years ago, and my second viewing was just this week as I was getting ready for this review. I would really like to give the film a third chance at some point down the line via that Blu-ray, you know, watch the remaster and stuff. But for now, I would class it as a disappointing film, really. It is much less than the 59 Mummy. If you have to choose between the two, go for the 59 one with Christopher Lee and Peter Cushing. This is a bit of a lapsadaisical follow-up. It is very sloppy in its execution. The storyline is very inconsistent. It makes some really bizarre choices. It's not completely unwatchable, but it's disappointing on the whole. So let's get to the bag of terror and find out what sort of score I'm going to give for The Curse of the Mummy's Tomb. Not much in here today, sadly. Just 1.5 bloody axes out of 5. I'll be back soon for another Hammer Studios review. Until next time, cheerio, bye-bye.